How come everywhere I go, it smells like weed?
Find out today on Medical History Mysteries.
Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Medical History Mysteries. Tom, sorry, we've been gone for a little bit.
It's okay. We've been busy, but we're never too late to get started again. So it's all good.
And there's always things happening, right? Like weed. Like, let's talk about weed. I swear, everywhere I go, I smell it. I smell it at the mall. I smell it walking, just like walking around. I smell it everywhere. What's happening with weed?
So I think we're up to almost 40 states, if I'm not mistaken, now that have passed some sort of legislation that has legalized cannabis use in that state. So there's only really at that point a handful left that have not authorized the use of cannabis for either medical or recreational use. And that was what you might call the status quo for a while until the government shutdown that happened at the end of last year. One of the components of the bill that reopened the government was a, a piece of legislation that said we need to address this issue with cannabis. And so what President Trump is going to do is put it on the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to reschedule cannabis from Schedule 1, which means it's illegal at the federal level and has no accepted medical use and therefore is not, open to research, et cetera, and move it to Schedule 3. Now, that does not mean it's going to be legalized. It just means it's going to be Schedule 3. So technically, it may be open to research. The federal government may now be able to provide funding for research, whereas before maybe it wasn't so likely to. Other institutions can get larger samples now and be able to do wider testing. If they, again, if they apply for a federal grant, they might get some funding that way, or they might do their own funding. But it's still going to be illegal. So regardless of, the fact that it's Schedule 1 or Schedule 3, it's still illegal at the federal level. That same legislation restricted the use of THC in some products. So, for example, here in New Jersey, you could have purchased a seltzer, carbonated water, with 5 to 10% THC content because New Jersey allowed for the use of cannabis for both recreational and medical use, as well as other products that contain THC. So the federal government now, with this new legislation, says we're gonna not doing that anymore. You can't have more than 0.4% THC in anything. The other thing that happened was in those states, which is why I say, Pam, you've smelled it everywhere, is even in those states where it wasn't legal, the federal government passed legislation back in 2018 called the Farm Bill, which allowed people to grow hemp, specifically farmers, because hemp was descheduled. Farmers grow hemp. What do farmers do with the hemp? They sell it to make CBD. The law said as long as you can make it from hemp, it's legal. So hemp to CBD, and then from CBD, some people made it into congeners of Delta 9 THC. So Delta 9 THC is stuff to get you high, but I can take this CBD and make it into Delta 8 or Delta 10. It's not exactly Delta 9, so technically it's not illegal, but the law doesn't say it's legal, it just says it's not illegal. And so just basically everywhere there's THC. And that's why I think you and I could both say we smell it everywhere. And I mean, I'm with you. I'm so sensitive to that smell. I can pick it up just about anywhere at any time and I'll know who's using it. Here's the problem with the legislation. It's federal legislation. And just like before, the states could opt out. Plus, it's going to take a year to be enacted. And in that time, I'm sure there'll be machinations around, how we can make the law, you know, more agreeable to everyone. The one thing, though, that I think you and I need to talk about is the fact that the law now allows, by making it Schedule 3, the law now allows dispensaries to claim real business expenses before they couldn't. And I believe, and some of the people in the audience can correct me, I think it allows them to open bank accounts, have checking accounts, accept credit cards, accept checks for payment. Not 100% sure. I mean, again, I've not read the law in depth, but that is the biggest part of what you and I are discussing right now, because that is, again, just opening up cannabis use because it's making it more widely available because the dispensaries will have a greater opportunity to sell more cannabis, act more like regular businesses.
Now, we're not attorneys. We don't know the details of the law and the ins and outs of it. So, those of you out there, if you want to like email us and you're like, hey, we're already saying it, not attorneys. We don't know. But it's an interesting little nuance that something that's legal on the state level might not be legal on the federal level, but we can still sort of make it happen in our respective states. But this new legislation, I don't know. You know me, I'm like a glass half full kind of person. So I am wondering, testing that is going to take place. Is this going to be, and this is again just conjecture and just your opinion, I can't help but think this could be a good thing. Maybe we can get more information from the research that's going to be, that will come from this, but also maybe, just maybe, there'll be more legislation for the fabrication of these various forms, and hopefully it will ultimately be safer for the end user.
Oh, I'm 100% with you. I think the greatest danger of cannabis, if you want to call it that, is we don't know what we don't know. And so with greater testing, we can find out a lot more about cannabis than we ever have. And maybe we can actually apply that and use it for medicinal purposes where we haven't used it before. In addition to that, the greatest problem I think with cannabis beyond that is when you use cannabis, you never quite get the same cannabis. So you get a potpourri of 100 or so different cannabinoids every time you use cannabis. Even if you buy it from the same place, same time, every day, you're going to get a different form of cannabis. So that's the problem. In some cases, people like that because, well, I never know what I'm going to get. So that's the thrill, you know. But for others who use it to manage medical conditions, they want to get the same effect. They want that standardized product. And I think this law, this legislation might go a long way into allowing us to research how we can create products from cannabis that are more standardized and that I really identify which of the 100 cannabinoids does what. And I think that's going to help us in the long run.
Interesting. Well, I guess we should stay tuned, see what this actually shakes out into. But it's always important for us as dental professionals to know what's new and what's coming on, on the cutting edge of this type of information because our patients might ask us for it. So thank you for that. This was interesting.
Looking forward to telling all the audiences more as the news progresses. But one thing I will say in closing, if you ask your patient, do you use cannabis? And they say no, what you need to document is patient denies the use of cannabis, right? So that way it's in the chart. That way it lives forever. And that way, 3 years from now, if somebody asks you, what was the patient's response to that question? You don't have just a yes or a no. You've got your detailed note that says patient denies use of cannabis. And I think that's going to help a lot of people out there who struggle with documentation and whether or not, they need to write certain things in the chart that will live for posterity.
If it's not there, it didn't happen. And
Correct.
yes, we've
Exactly right.
talked about that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So ask and document. Absolutely. All right. Great point. Well, I will see everybody next week. Thank you for joining us for Medical History Mysteries, and we will see you then.
Take care, everybody.